glad you chose to come with us willingly, said Tamas. We would have had an issue if you had not chosen to come at all. Why is that? Asked Averly. The woods are not safe if you're traveling alone, even in a group such as yours. There are evil things in the woods at night, and we needed to make sure you were aware of them before you headed off, said Tamas. What sort of things? Asked Rose, curious. Magic things that don't make sense in the light of day, but can be awfully spooky when it gets dark. They start to come out at night if you don't have your fire set up properly, said Samsa. Who does? What do you mean set up properly? Said Samuel. Well, for starters, it can't be too big, and you must split the fire into parts, one at each corner of your camp. It lets them know you're there and should cast enough light so that no one is sitting in the darkness while they're within the camp's borders. It's also better to have two smaller camps than one larger one. It just doesn't seem to bother them the same way, said Tamas. Who are you talking about? Asked Barklin. Why, the Rams, of course. The mystical Rams of Alderon Forest. If we hadn't been left here with the fort, we surely would have been taken by them already, said Tamas. Barklin thought back to his dream he had a few days ago. Couldn't be, he thought to himself. Are they dangerous? Asked Barklin. About the most dangerous thing in the forest, I reckon, outside of crossing us, said Tamas, smiling. The raccoons at the table agreed with him. The two young raccoons came back with the table with refreshments, a collection of teas for the travelers and those around them. Rose thanked the small raccoon as he handed her the glass of cool tea. So is it worth us going out back tonight to the bridge? Asked Rose, sipping her tea. That's up to you. As long as you have your tent set up properly and the fires burning brightly before the night starts to fall, you should be all right. But if you would happen to like it, we would be happy to have you here for the night. There's plenty of space out by the fire pit, and we can spend the night telling each other about the lands we come from and what it's like to live in the forest. We know you come from a town, likely Mistlehot from the west or Tanzeria from the north, said Tamas. We just wanted to make sure you weren't caught unaware of the situation before nightfall. Plenty of animals have disappeared when they don't know how to keep the fires lit. Rose thought it over and asked the others, What would you like to do? We've been invited by these lovely raccoons to spend the night. The three of them looked at one another and spoke in unison. May we please stay here? They had no interest in meeting the Rams if they didn't have to, and the idea of being safely behind the walls of the fort seemed like a good idea. Tamas and Samsa looked at one another and laughed. Sure you can. We'd be honored to have you here as our guest, said Samsa. All right, boys, you heard her. Let's show these animals what it's like to spend a night with the Bars and Stripes gang, yelled Tamas. The room was filled with the yipping and yahoos of the younger raccoons as they showed their support for their leader's decision. They quieted down, and a few left the table, going outside to clear the area for the travelers so they could set up camp for the night. The others dispersed as well, some leaving the fort to gather wood for the night's fire. The two others left to go get fish from the river for that night's dinner. They rarely had guests of any sort within their walls. It was going to be a party. The four travelers and two young leaders of this group stayed at the table and discussed what it was to be done for the night. Brooklyn asked, Is there anything we can do to help set up for tonight? No, not really, said Samsa. We're pretty self-sufficient here, and we wouldn't want our guests to worry about having to get anything ready. Once the boys have cleared away the area by the fire pit, we can help you set up your tents. In the meantime, we can show you around the fort and get you up to speed on what we know about the Rams. If you want to help tonight, you can help take watch of the early shift so you're not too tired for tomorrow for your travel. You'll want to be out of the forest as soon as you can be, because as long as you're in their woods, you're in their domain. Elwood sat by the gate and stared out into the forest, dozing slightly. He had been there all morning, and like most days, nothing had happened. He was starting to get sleepy from the lack of change in the trees and the heat of the day. He began to snore softly. In the trees beyond his eyesight, a small purple flame flashed, illuminating the tree with an eerie green light for a moment, and two yellow square pupils appeared, staring out from the flames, then disappeared back into nothingness. The flames then faded. Elwood didn't notice. He was dreaming and smiling softly to himself as he slept. The troop spent the rest of the day relaxing by the pond within the fort, being led on a tour of the fort itself and being shown its history. Our parents made the fort years ago, when we were small, said Tamas, pointing towards his sister Samson and back to himself as they walked. One night they went for a walk and never came back. We spent weeks searching every last part of the forest we could get to, and we never found them, said Samson. We're not sure if the Rams got them or what, but we're sure they'll come back one day, said Tamas. A small group of raccoons ran by them shrieking and yelling with one another. One of the boys had grabbed one of the young girl's dolls and was running past the two older raccoons when Thomas grabbed it and gave it back to the girl. He waggled his finger at the boy and told him off for stealing the girl's favorite and only toy. The boy apologized and the small raccoons ran off to continue with their playtime. We've taken care of our brothers and sisters since then, said Thomas. Samuel and Avery looked at one another. They're your brothers and sisters? Exclaimed Avery. Thomas and Samson nodded. Avery looked around in amazement. There had to be over 20 small raccoons running around the place, sweeping, playing, stacking firewood, or tending to those in the pond that were bathing or splashing in the water. It's amazing that you're able to take care of them so well, considering you're about our age, said Avery. Thomas smiled as did Samson. They're pretty good. Most of them were scared for a while once Mom and Dad disappeared, but they learned pretty quickly to follow our lead, and they trust us completely. There's very little infighting because we're all working together until they come back. We've been able to teach them to help fend for themselves, and everyone knows what is expected of them and when. Even the younglings help around the house, bathing the smaller ones, and make sure they're having their naps and the like, said Samson. We're very lucky that way. If they had decided to act spoiled or make it difficult for us, then we would have liked... I don't know what we would have done, said Thomas. Avery looked at them both square in the eye and said, You two are stunning. So, you tell them they're part of the gang and it gets them to settle down and act more like adults than their years would let on. Yes, it was Samson's idea, and we teach them to be part of a group straight away. We would tell them stories when we were younger about how we would look after them and they would get to join the gang and be safe too, replied Thomas. The four travelers looked at the two raccoons, both not much larger than Samuel, and beamed at them. They had met a wonderfully dedicated pair of siblings and their young family in the middle of the woods, and they had opened their home to them, no questions asked, as though they were part of their families already. They were overjoyed at the warmth of their welcome. They walked through the main building of the fort, Tema and Samson showing them the room through the kitchen, and that had lines of bunk beds, 4 beds high, and a double bed at the very end. Even though it appeared that no one had slept in it for ages, the bed was spotless, the sheets folded neatly and the blanket covering it tucked in on 3 sides. No one sleeps there until they come back, said Samson. The little ones get the young ones up at dawn, and we're up just after them with their morning noises. Then we make them a large pot of porridge for the group, and everyone gets their chores for the day, and who to check on with, so we can keep track of everything throughout the day, said Thomas. They check in throughout the day, and we know when anyone leaves the fort or returns and what they're doing. Everyone is back in time for dinner to close the gate, and once everyone's accounted for, we all settle in and have our meal. That sounds like it works well, said Samuel. It does. We haven't had a problem with the system except when Joey sprained his ankle messing around on the rocks by the river, and we had to go out and bring him back in. That was a couple of months ago, said Samson. Thomas nodded. He wasn't hurt too badly, just a bit scared of the fall into the water. We got him back here and fixed him up pretty quickly, though, said Thomas. Mom liked to read a lot, so we had plenty of books to read on how to fix small injuries and how to cook for a large group such as ours. So we've been doing okay, thankfully. He pointed to the large bookcases that were wrapped around the end of the room and behind the large bed. There were rows and rows of books, hundreds of different titles in various shapes and sizes. There were even stacks of them between the shelves themselves. Oh, lovely, said Barklin. Do you mind if I have a look through what you've got? I might have 1 or 2 to trade if you're interested. Of course, that would be fine as long as it's not something we need, or if we have 2 copies of it, you're welcome to have one of them, said Thomas. Barklin moved over to the shelves and started perusing the books. They left him there with the books and went out to the back of the fort through a door in between the shelves out to the grassy field. Canopies had been set up in a square pattern, and the tables lined the areas underneath the shade of the tents. There were metal funnels leading out of the canopies where small braziers were set. This is where we eat most of our meals, though if there's just not enough room inside the main hall for all of us at once unless it's absolutely pouring outside. Then we make do, said Samson. Young raccoons were situated at the table playing cards with one another. They each held a stack of cards and would pull one out from the top of their collection and lay it face up on the pile. When there was a pair of the same card, the first one to lay their paw on the pile and yell, Snap! Would get to keep the pile, shuffling it before it was their turn again. A large raccoon had just won the pile from the center of the table and was smiling when he shuffled his cards. Make sure to let the others get in there, Milo, or the game will be over soon, said Samson. The young raccoon acquiesced. The game continued as the group passed by them. The children are very well behaved, said Rose. Yes, we all take our manners very seriously, said Thomas. If we didn't, we would be raising bedlam. It makes it so much easier when the children follow instruction politely than argue with you all the time. Not that we don't have arguments ourselves from time to time. They circled back into the main grounds, walking around the perimeter of the building and passing a few deep-set windows cut into the log frame. Does it get cold in the winter? Asked Rose. It can do, but we make sure that we have enough dry wood to last us for any time of the year, and it's worked out well so far, said Samsa. They passed the large shingle-covered wood racks stacked against the edge of the building, through the window in the doorway, and could see the kitchen's great hulking black stove. A great pot was situated on top of it while flames licked its bottom. We cook all day, every day, and store what we don't eat in the pantry for later, said Tamas. We learn to have food on store in case of days of rain, or to be able to change it up if the children get sick of the same food day in and day out. They walked through the field connecting the back door to the fence and over to the flat-packed dirt area where a great circle of sooty stones placed within it. A pit had been dug between the stones and ash and embers laid in the carefully constructed circular pattern within the safety barrier. A large assortment of cut logs had been placed in the center, and kindling and tinder had been placed underneath the pyre to allow the heat to build from the inside outward and allow air through. It was at this point that Sammy noticed the torch sconces that had been built into the fence walls. There were lines of them interrupted by large braziers midway through each wall's length. Are those lit every night? Asked Samuel. Yes, they have to be, just before dusk. Keeps the rams out and makes the younglings feel safe and cozy, said Samsa. Samuel looked along the length of the wall as they kept walking. Each brazier was filled with wood and tinder for the beginning of the night shift, and there would be stacks of wood placed neatly in piles beneath them. They continued on down around to the pond. And here's the pond you saw earlier, said Tamas. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go to stop the tour for now and go and check on Elwood, make sure he's awake at the station. Sorry about that. The others offered no protest and moved on with Samsa as Tamas made his way through to the front gate. Elwood, you awake? Yelled Tamas. Of course I am, squeaked back a groggy Elwood. Samsa laughed to herself as they went back inside to finish their discussion. They found Barkland sitting at the oval table with a stack of books pressed out in front of him. His head was bent and he was reading a large book. Samsa walked up behind him. Would you like some scones for lunch? Samsa asked him. Moments later, Barkland responded, seemingly too caught up in his book to hear her. Oh, that'd be lovely, thank you, said Barkland. Rose and Samuel looked at each other, and Rose said, I know it's a good book, Barkland, but I think it's time we put it down and join the discussion we're having. You were just about to tell us about the rams, weren't you? Samsa nodded. Let me go and get those sorted, and we'll have another round of peach tea before we get into it. It should give Tamas time to get up to speed with the others and be back in time for lunch. He'll want to tell you about them anyway, said Samsa. She moved back into the kitchen and could be heard telling one of the younger raccoons that it was time for lunch and to get everyone ready. We're having scones and jam for lunch today. The same small female raccoon that had been having trouble with her dolly ran out, dolly and paw, and made her way to the front door. She could be heard yelling, Lunchtime, scones and jam, around the yard as she swung through the field and back to the children playing cards. All at once the raccoons moved over to the canopies out back and sat in lines at the tables there. She came back into the room and ran into the kitchen, the door swinging wildly where she had hit it. They're ready, she said. Thank you, Lisa. Help me bring the jam out, and we'll go get them fed, then tell them to wash up and behave themselves while we have our discussion in here. If there are any problems, you know where to find us, said Samsa. She popped her head out of the kitchen door and said, Be out in a moment. Just got to get them sorted before we can have ours. No problem, said Averly. She popped back behind the door. The group waited for her to get back. Did you find something worth reading, Barkley? Asked Averly. Barkland reached for the book he had closed and then said, Yes, there are a few books here that I would love to read while we're here, but I don't have the time to read them all. This one is particularly interesting. He held it up for them to see. It was a huge cloth-bound tome with a picture of ram's horns painted in gold leaf on the side of it. The glyphs printed under the picture read Netherine. Is that what I think it is? Said Rose. Seems to be the history of the mystical order of rams following their old god Netherine, and how they brought the ascension to the upper levels of the gods through their magic and devotion to him, said Barkland. Spooky stuff? Asked Samuel. It's pretty scary when it gets into how they used to sacrifice other animals to their god back in the day. Blood oath of the order, they used to call them, said Barkland. You don't think their parents were sacrificed, do you? Asked Averly. I don't know, but I know I'd rather not find out, said Barkland. The others agreed with him as Samson moved through the door carrying a tray heaped with scones on plates and cups of peach tea in her arms. They're all happily eating, so we can talk. She placed a tray on the table and placed a plate in front of each of her guests and then herself. She set an extra place for Tamas. He opened the door and made his way to the table. Elwood is eating his lunch. Tony has already finished his, so he's covering for him at the front gate, said Tamas. Great, said Samsa, and they both sat down at the table. Tamas reached for the jar of jam that was sitting on the table and spread some over one side of his scone. He bit into it and through a mouthful said, So you want to know more about the rams of the forest? I'll tell you all that I know. They would be mighty fond of you, said Samuel. Barky's been reading that book of the Netherine. Are those the same rams that live in the forest? I think so. It looks like it's the the religion of the Rams is pretty much the same throughout. They're broken into sects and each worship a different part of the old god's mythos. I've even heard that some of them have broken off and worship a whole new god, but I can't be sure. They tend to keep to themselves during the night as long as you have fires protecting you from them. They leave you alone. Occasionally we'll see rows of lights waltzing through the forest, and we assume it's them heading or coming from their hideout. But I'll be blasted if I have any idea what it is they're doing. They tend to be more active when there's a full moon out, and we've had reports of them coming out earlier on nights when the light is clear like that. You hear them chanting when they get close, the same words over and over. Chibri, Ibril, Ribble, Ectum, said Tamis. It's creepy when they get close. Long lines of slow-moving animals passing through the forest, giving little ones nightmares and worrying us. Glad they stick to the shadows myself, said Samsa. Shadows looked at one another and Barklin asked, It looks like they used to abduct animals and sacrifice them to their old god Netherine. Do you think that's what happened to your parents? The two raccoons looked at each other worried. We don't know. But we hope not, said Samsa. We couldn't live with ourselves if we thought that had happened. Better to think that they got picked up and brought to the city to the north. Maybe one day you'll get to find out, said Averly. Hopefully one day soon, said Tamis with a small amount of bitterness in his voice. It was then that Rose noticed how tired they both were. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. So Anchor is asking me to ask you to support me financially. I would ask that you go to my Patreon to do that, which is patreon.com/divergentmind. It means you can either become a monthly subscriber at a different tier of $1 to $3 to $5. I'm not looking for a lot. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not asking for anything. This is going to go to the end of my podcast. I don't like it when podcasts straight up ask you for money when I'm doing okay. Well, I'm not doing okay. I'm surviving now to the point that I can make this. I would love to be able to make improvements to this by, say, getting... So basically, I'm running off an iPad, and I would like to improve it by getting different things that would make it better. Maybe some headphones that monitor output, or a better mic. Though the mic I got was from JWife, so I might not even use the better mic. You know what I mean? It's all about whatever I need at the time, but really it's just to get healthy again, because I'm currently over 300 pounds and I don't want to die that young. I would really like to be able to afford some vegetables so I can go back to my vegetarian diet, because being this big sucks. And I'm happy to sit in a chair all day, but I really got to walk my butt off, literally. So that's what the money would be for. It would be for healthy food, because I can't afford it. I can afford ramen and pasta and rice and beans, but I can't live on carbs, because that's how you get this big on antipsychotics. Junk food and carbs, which is just cheap and plentiful around me. So I would like to leave my house and just lose some weight. And to do that, I would like to go to the store and buy some vegetables, please. But you don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not begging. I'll figure it out on my own. Much pleasure, Jay.
Hey people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness, and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.